Hello there, Josh here from racingtoprofit.co.uk. Hopefully you can see me and hear me clearly enough in the bottom right hand corner. This video, which I haven't done one on this topic actually before, is for those of you, I suppose, who like to do your own stats research, or have any interest in how I pull together what is Trainer Track Profiles Jumps 2018-2019, which hopefully you have your free copy of. And I thought I would look at Sedgefield, wherever it's gone. There we go. Just as an example, really, because I am recording this on the 27th of November 2018, and Sedgefield raced today, so I thought that might make some sense. And there are kind of 5 qualifiers against the stats in this report. So really, I'm going to dive into horse race base in a moment, and that's one of my accounts you can see in front of you, and go from scratch from the beginning, looking at how I research such stats. You'll see that bar crop up in the bottom. I'm conscious that I should keep a track of time, because long-suffering watchers of my videos or readers or followers will know that I can drone on at times, and these videos could probably be a bit shorter if I snapped to it. So I will try and do that. The first thing I want to say is kind of explaining the principles or some of the ideas behind this approach. The stats and the qualifiers against the stats in this report kind of last me for the next kind of 12 months after they've been researched, and mainly during the main winter jump season. I like studying trainers and patterns of behavior. Trainers are creatures of habit. The tricky thing is trying to find those habits, but I suppose one of the main ways in is with track records. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that certain trainers do target certain tracks. Those where they've had success, trainers do avoid tracks if they're superstitious, where they don't have a great record. And of course, over time, they know the type of horse needed to perform well at certain racetracks. So we can build up a kind of picture and a pattern and a kind of historical record from which we can go to war with, in the hope, of course, that these trainers, or some of them, or enough of them, are going to repeat those patterns over time, with the ultimate aim, or the twin aim, which is always the case with anything I do, to be profitable, or certainly not to lose any money over time, because losing money over time in this great sport of ours isn't much fun, and also, of course, linked to that, in order to have some fun. And with this free report, I suppose, I'd like to think, I suppose it's some kind of trainer stats Bible to a point, but I'd like to think it offers a good foundation and a free resource, really, if you wish to find the qualifiers yourself, in which to give you a set of starting points moving forward through the season, a kind of list of horses that you can use as a way in to further analyse moving forward, every day really, or if you're going racing, of course, to provide a list of kind of handicap bets that you might wish to get stuck into. And of course, there are the elite squad, which, if you've read through the kind of latest free report, that's that. I've explained that and pulled out all of those angles, but that basically looks at the best of my stats, which I've defined as those angles and those trainers that have had at least 10 winners in the research period, whether it's the 5-year general handicap stats or the 3-year general stats and the micro stats, with at least a 25% win strike rate. And you can see some of the results from those at the beginning of this free report. Those angles as of a kind of week or two ago were 57 points up so far in 2018, which, to kind of modest bets, is a decent return. So yes, we've got creatures of habit. I suppose the logic and the stat significance, which I could explain as I go through, but I want to explain the kind of foundations and then whiz through the horse race based stuff. I researched this guide against my unique template, which, if I skip up to the top here, I've kind of explained that there. I like to focus on handicaps, but the idea is that in terms of, certainly for a free resource, it's pretty hard to find some of the stats that I look at here, and certainly those handicap stats which strip out novice handicaps, which strip out selling handicaps. A lot of handicap stats around, even free resources, kind of bulk everything together, and I do personally think you should kind of look at them separately. For reasons I may explain later, but we've got handicaps. I introduced a new section kind of for the last 5 years, really to give some more weighty stats. Now with trainer stats particularly, you're never necessarily going to have a pile of stats which you could argue are statistically significant. The whole point with trainer stats is we're trying to find a logic and a pattern of behavior that we can tap into, and in the hope that that will be repeated over time. And in my mind, that means you don't need the stats necessarily to be that weighty, but I did want to find those with at least 10 winners either in the last 5 years at that track within the race type or the last 3, with a 25% win strike rate or higher, as discussed, just to give us actually a set of and a simple system that we can use without having to do any further thought. And touch wood, that's worked okay for the last couple of seasons, and I'd take kind of 55 to 80 points, around about the 27% return on investment. I'd take that from kind of averaging 1.5 bets a day every year, really, because every little helps and it all adds up over time, and you've got that set of systems for free. And the other thing I should say when researching through this, I have a couple of things in mind. Yes, there's those angles. I have in mind the strategies, which I look at in the members post, but I won't touch on those today, because I do something called a fusion, whereby I combine 3 sets of horse ratings, horse race base, inform speed, and GG speed from Dr. Peter May, and I use those against my daily stats qualifiers against this stats pack in order to influence some further strategies and systems, which touch wood, enough of them are done very well. Some of them some big profits to Betfair SP. And with that in mind, that makes me less, I suppose, precious on some of the stats, especially as I move into these micro angles. You're not going to find kind of 10 winners or 5 winners necessarily regularly against some of these areas here that you can see in front of you. And I have in mind some of the strategies when I'm researching those. So really we have a mix. We have a mix of some proper weighty trainer stats, especially with the 5-year ones, and then some more interesting ones which tap into some patterns of behavior, and certainly micro angles too. Some of those, the distance move and class move, handicap debut, their reasons for why the horse and the qualifier against those stats may improve on previous form, especially if unexposed, but that's probably a topic for another day in terms of how you may approach racing. Let me crack on as I'm ticking round to 8 minutes, but hopefully this video is flying by. You might be on your second cup of tea or coffee or something a bit stronger depending on when you're watching this, and hopefully you're finding it enjoyable enough so far. I'll just put my teeth in. So that explains some of the creatures of habit, the logic, the research aims. And I like the fact, the final thing I should say is obviously those stats remain static through the whole year, which I don't mind. That's my job. I put in about 30 to 40 hours, kind of from mid-August. I kind of spread it out, mid-August to kind of the first meeting, the first jumps meeting proper at Chepstow in October, whereby I reproduce the guide every year to freshen it up. But since I started researching this guide a couple of years ago, it's been very good at helping me find angles and systems, and it's been decent as a kind of starting point and a way in, which is the aim. So for those of you who may like horse race base or have some other kind of research criteria you use, I'm a big fan of horse race base. I should probably give my thanks to Chris and his team. Well, I say his team, I think it might just be him. It's a superb piece of kit, and all of my stats research in general, and certainly the trainer track profiles, would not be possible without this great bit of kit. So let's crack on. I'll start from the beginning at kind of where I look and what I'm looking for. I'm going to research here in the top right hand corner. I'm going to system builder, and I'm going to try desperately to keep this under 10 minutes and whiz through, just so you get a flavour and a feel. And of course, if you have any questions, fire them my way, and I'll do my best to help answer them. So yes, we're in horse race space. At this point, I've got no data to dig into. I've got 20 years or so of racing post data, which I think is what Chris licenses. But I need a starting set of data to dig into. And we're looking at Sedgefield, remember. So I've got race code. I mean, that's not important necessarily for Sedgefield, given they only have jumps racing, but for some of the other tracks that have flat and all weather, etc., that's quite important. I want the track. I want to pick the year, so I've selected those. Hopefully you can see that straightforward enough there. I know many of you watching this video may well have a horse race base account as well. I'm selecting National Hunt, but this should give you an idea of the process I went through for each track to produce the stats I did, and hopefully it might give you some ideas to help with your own research if you so want, whether using this bit of kit or something else. Because it's always good to try and educate and think and move forwards in this great game of ours. So, National Hunt, obviously, I'm looking at Sedgefield. Now, when I'm researching this guide from the beginning, I am just going through every track alphabetically and just going through and through. You'll notice in the report, I should add, there are no summer stats. Summer tracks, I should say. There are 5 tracks which exclusively race over the summer, and I produce a new report for them kind of May time, and I'll send that out for free if you're still on my email list by then and haven't got sick of me. So Sedgefield, what am I selecting? 2018. Now the first set against my template is for 5 years, and it kind of goes, well, it's 5 full years. So it's 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 2018 to date. Of course, I'm researching this now, so it's kind of nearly 6 years of data, I suppose. We've got that. So that will give me every race run and bet run and everything run at Sedgefield since the beginning of the 2013 calendar year. At this point, I'm adding race type. You'll know that I'm looking at handicaps in general. You can see all the different race types that are run at Sedgefield there in front of you. I want to scroll down here. I want standard handicap chases and handicapped hurdles to start with. That's where my general stats come from. That's where the micro angle stats come from. I don't like focusing on handicap sellers. And you'll see a section within the template where I do look at handicap novice chases and handicap novice hurdles, and I'll flick back to those a bit later. But the point here is, yeah, I like to focus just on standard handicap chases and handicap hurdles. In general, handicap novice chase and hurdles, of course, are horses that are yet to win. They might be of more mediocre ability, of course. Then you do have winners that won or that didn't win before their novice year, competing in some of those under penalties or with, well, yeah, under penalties or their ratings having gone up, etc. But yes, there are reasons why I like to strip out those data, and it also gives a slightly different set of stats than you can find in the kind of general racing press, I suppose, because I think all of their handicap stats just include all handicaps. So there are reasons why I like to exclude those, as I do think actually they're a slightly different beast and a slightly different code to a point. So if I select those, effectively now I'm looking at all handicaps, because obviously handicap chase and handicap hurdles, there aren't any other handicaps run on the jumps card. That's the starting point set of data. So I've got 5 years, and now from this I'm looking at, and I want to find those trainers that have done well and those trainers that have had at least 10 winners and a 25% win strike rate. Remember, I'm looking at the last 5 years here. So if you've got horse race base or something else, I used a dig function in the top right hand corner here. I want to select this will order, and this is, you can use a dig function to compare 2 or more different angles together. So a minimum of 1 is fine in terms of qualifiers, and I like ordering it initially from winners high to low. Now I'm going to break down here, so I'm going to break down by race type, because I want to look at trainers that may have done well in handicap hurdles or handicap chases separately, and from my starter set of data that will split those 2, and of course I want to look at trainer. So I do the dig function, I go to proceed, and you can see there the list of ordered winners. And you know, I'm looking at a minimum 10 winners, 25% win strike rate, and you can see the angles there, and you can see the bets, the wins, win percentage, and you can break down. You can actually, if you've got horse race base, select what different stats you want to see on this particular table. And yeah, I kind of use over expected, or I should say, actual versus expected. That's what AE stands for. Sorry, I just had to think for a minute then. And that's the kind of winners which are expected against the starting price or the Betfair starting price of the horse. One's kind of the benchmark. Anything higher than one is okay, and the bigger the number, the better. Chi is, I haven't quite got my, well, I have got my head around what that is, but I kind of use it as a guide. But that's a kind of an angle and a way of looking at the stats to try and work out if what's just happening is random or it's better than random. And I think, if I'm correct, a number kind of around 3.5 or higher indicates the stats highly unlikely to be just based, well, just to be random really. But we are dealing with small enough sample sizes, so there's always some kind of danger, and argument could be made they should just be used as a guiding point. But anyway, that's the breakdown test, and then from there you can use this run feature to the right hand side. I'm around about 16 minutes. This will probably go on for 25. Where you can use this run feature, which then just breaks down into the different stats. If I take Ken Slack down here, I can click run, and I can see the different stats, and I can see, and I do this for every stat within the report. I suppose that's why each track can take 30 minutes to an hour, and I'm looking at each stat to see if there's a consistency. I don't mind one losing year. I'm looking at the place stats to see actually if they might have been quite unlucky. Ken Slack has, I can't quite work out the yard. He still trains them. He's very linked to Diane Sayer. Are they related? They might be brother and sister possibly. I forget which. Those yards are related. And he did have a kind of golden spell in 2016, did quite well last year. But I can look at the stats, I can get a feel for how they've done over the year, well, over the period, I should say. I can also look through, at the place sources, I can look through at all the qualifiers. And importantly, I can look at winners, so I can list them. And generally here, with any kind of trainer stat, you can get to a point where the trainer stat is just built on one horse or two horses. Now that can be okay, it's just judging it, but ideally, because we're tapping into a pattern of behavior, clearly I want the trainer to be sending well, the record not to be just based on one horse. Of course, if that horse is still arguably young and unexposed, it's worth noting, and this process is worth doing because you can track the horse separately if you want, as a kind of course and distance specialist or something like that. So there's always options when digging into stats like this. But that breaks down there, and if I just bring up the original stats for Sedgefield, where are we? Southall, Sedgefield. You'll see actually I've broke down my handicap hurdles there, but if I go back, so this is part of the research I do. I break down by race type, which you can see there. I like there to be a positive figure at Betfair, at starting price, sorry, generally, and at Betfair. But again, when looking at the qualifiers, it's also important to make sure necessarily that the profit isn't swayed by one massive price winner. And again, but you're just taking a temperature feel, and I suppose that's where my experience or your own thoughts come into how you might look at and interpret some of these stats. So that's the breakdown of that. I can then just break down by handicap. So by just selecting handicap, that will just look at both handicap hurdles and handicap chases. I can look at trainer, and I can get the all handicaps figures, as you can see here. And you can see from those stats there, backing all of Mickey Hammond's handicap hurdles and chases at Sedgefield blind, probably not the best approach, as you can see there. Same with Sue Smith. But they provide decent actual stats pools in which to then dig and find other angles, which I think a couple of those both appear later on in the Sedgefield stats profile. So yeah, handicap, you can see there Diane Sayer. You can see a reason why they perform 81% above market expectations, generally consistent. This is a track they target, not loads of qualifiers a year, but normally gets a couple of winners. The place percentage is all right. You can see the qualifiers down here. She does tend to go in, Sendy and won a few, but it's clear from the number of different horses, I think, that it is a track they target. And yeah, not much more to say on that. Again, this kind of record, well, you can see here from the stats report here, both Sayer and Slack have the 10 winners or more, have the 25% plus or bigger win strike rate, and therefore because of that angle they hit the elite squad plus, or what I could think of my best of. And in the 1250, you'll probably be watching this if you're watching it at all and you're still with me after these races have run. But Millie the Minx, Millie the Minx qualifies against the Sayer all handicap stat there and is an elite squad qualifier. So yeah, basically that's how we do the first 5 year bit, and it's that process all the way through, digging down, looking in different trainers, working out whether or not I'm happy with the stats, the number of horses they've run, etc. And then I can delete these, I can break down by year, and then we are, well, if I can see year, there we go. I can break down by year, and now when I move into the other stats, I'm looking at the last 3 full years, so since the start of 2015 to the year to date. And I think it's important, I like that twin approach of the 5-year general handicap stats and the 3 years. There's so many things that can change within a trainer. They can get new facilities, they can move yards, they can train, they can change training technique, they can start sourcing and buying different horses, they can lose or gain different owners, which of course can affect their budget and the types of horses they can buy. They can work with different jockeys, they can get different stable jockeys, different sponsors. Hopefully every trainer is always looking for ways they can improve their training. So in general, you'd think over a 3-year period, well, certainly at the beginning of that cycle, if the trainers had a poor record and they're still doing exactly the same thing 3 years later, you've got to start questioning them, I suppose. So I like to freshen it up with 3 years, because you're kind of keeping on top of any of those changes, and of course new trainers that might be coming on stream. And again, all of that is researched in mind with the idea that yes, I'm trying to find kind of things like the elite squad, but I'm also trying to find angles and things that I can exploit with ratings and the different strategies I have in the back of my head when researching the stats. So we have that. I'm not going to go through the general race types, but that's pretty much the same process as with that. But with the general race types, I do look for the all handicaps, handicap chases and handicap hurdles. I look for a minimum of 5 winners as a benchmark. You'll see within the template, if there wasn't a stat that I deem worthy, I just removed the section, so you can see there that for the last 3 years there are no trainers necessarily that hit my criteria in handicap chases. I do the same for novice handicaps. Maybe I'll jump back to that. Again, I'm kind of minimum 3 winners. I'm not too precious on that, and we'll look at try and find trainers that have a general handicap decent record, because of course if they do then have 1 or 2 or more winners in novice handicaps and they already appear on my stats for the handicaps above here, that would indicate of course they generally target the whole track with all of their handicappers, including the kind of novice handicappers. What I will do is skip through as I tick around to 23 minutes. I told you it might go on, but hopefully you're still with me. Hopefully it's still interesting. Sometimes you can't rush these things. What I thought I would do is I get rid of that screen. And basically then I just go through the template, which is at the beginning of this report, against all these different angles, looking for different ways in and different angles, as you can see there. I suppose if I just look at trainer jockey combo as an example, I don't think I need to go through all of them, but I suppose this part of the video is for those of you who may wish to do your own research or at least understand the approach. But I'm digging minimum, I'm listing by wins higher to lower, and I do just go through as I skip up to the top here this template of every one of these different angles, micro angles, which you can see here. All of those exist on this screen in front of you in Horse Race Base. So for trainer jockey, and remember here now, because I'm looking at those handicap chases and handicap hurdles, so it's all handicaps, it's both together. You can then dig down further if you want, but you can look at the you can look at the record there. This is listed by winners, don't forget. So I can go through, I'm scanning, I'm looking at kind of general rules of, well, for the micro angles, 3 winners is fine. Generally a 20% win strike rate. But again, I then dig into all of these different angles and see if it's a pattern of behavior, see if the jockeys are booked for certain reasons for this particular track, and again you can see all those through there. So that's very much the process. I don't need to bore you to tears with going through all of that, I don't think. I should say, when you've got small kind of sample sizes, like I said, you're looking at kind of creatures of habit. But when you're looking at, say, Mulholland and Feely, kind of 3 from 5 could be viewed as a positive, given Mulholland wouldn't send that many runners to the track and Noel Feely wouldn't ride many. So when they do come and team up together, their horses and their rides are definitely worth closer inspection. So there is some value, I think, in looking at the smaller numbers, because it would suggest those connections don't send runners that often, but when they do, they can tend to mean business. But again, you can have that all in mind if using the qualifiers as starting points. So as I tick around to 25 minutes, I think that's probably it. Hopefully you've got a bit and understood a bit about my thinking behind my approach to the stats and how I use them moving forward. And of course, if you enjoy looking at your own research, or have any interest in kind of digging, especially in something like horse race base, some of that might have given you some ideas, as well the micro angles here. But essentially, this is my Bible and compendium for the year, the stats companion for the main winter jump season, whereby I find the qualifiers against them every day, 7 days a week. The elite squad, obviously, that's a kind of micro system in itself, as explained. There are other things and other strategies which I apply to those qualifiers. But depending on when you're watching this video, probably more on that in due course. But for now, hopefully, you've found that 26 minutes has flown by, and you found some of what I've said interesting, and hopefully something you can apply to your own betting, or at least understand where I'm coming from in the free report that you should have. So all that leaves me to say is thanks for watching. I do like recording these videos every now and then, so hopefully, yeah, you found it of some use. And I'll be back soon at some point. But yes, until the next time, this is Josh saying thanks for watching. Take care and see you soon.